Behind the Grand Canyon's breathtaking beauty lie some of the worst and most haunting deaths ever to occur on its trails. In this video, we're uncovering 6 of the most horrifying and completely preventable Grand Canyon tragedies ever recorded. It was July 12, 2018, in Grand Canyon National Park, Arizona. The sun had already turned the landscape into a white blur by mid-morning, and the canyon floors shimmered like molten metal. That morning, 2 friends from Phoenix walked past danger signs, laughing, carrying less water than one person would need on a mild day. Mark Uri, 27, and Ryan Patel, 28, both worked in sales at a mid-sized software company in Tempe. They had met 2 years earlier at a company retreat and bonded over manly competition: who could lift more at the gym, who could handle more spice, who could go longer without rest. Ryan had recently moved from Seattle and was still adjusting to Arizona's heat, while Mark, who grew up in Mesa, often bragged that you just get used to it. Both men spent hours scrolling through a casual hiking Facebook group where weekend adventurers compared routes and gear setups. The night before the hike, Mark posted in that group announcing their plan to crush a trail in one push, even tagging the post with a sun emoji and a joking caption about hydration being optional. The responses came fast. Some users mocked the idea, while others warned that people faint on that trail every summer from heat stroke. A few begged them to start before sunrise or turn back by 10 a.m. Mark just replied with a laughing emoji. The trail they chose is notorious for its deceptive layout, descending first through shaded rock corridors before opening into a sun-baked corridor with few water stations. Temperatures there can exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit by noon, magnified by the canyon's rock walls. Rangers recommend carrying at least 1 gallon of water per person per hour. Mark packed less than a quart in a soft bottle clipped to his backpack. Ryan brought 2 sports drinks and a bag of almonds. At 10:18 a.m., they started from the south rim. Other hikers coming up the trail warned them to turn back. One woman specifically mentioned that the lower section was like an oven. Mark shrugged it off, saying they'd be fine if they paced themselves. Ryan hesitated but followed. As they descended, the air thickened with reflected heat. The thermometer at the 3-mile rest house read 107 degrees Fahrenheit. By then, their shirts were soaked through and their voices had gone quiet. Around noon, they reached a flat stretch near Indian Garden. The few shaded alcoves were already occupied by cautious hikers waiting out the midday peak. Mark, red-faced and breathing heavily, decided they should keep going to beat the clock. Ryan tried to sip water, but found his bottle empty. His head began pounding, consequences of dehydration creeping. They passed another group resting beneath a ledge who warned them again not to proceed, but Mark waved them off. Minutes later, they were alone, trudging across open terrain under full sun. Eyewitnesses coming from the opposite direction first noticed them about 40 minutes later. From a distance, the pair looked like they were resting, one lying motionless near a boulder, the other bent over with hands on knees. As the approaching hikers drew closer, they realized something was wrong. Mark was face down in the dust, skin pale and dry. Ryan was staggering, trying to speak but producing only slurred sounds. When he collapsed again, the hikers dragged him into the narrow shade and called 911 on a satellite phone. 2 others tried to shield Mark with a jacket, while another poured the last of their water on his neck and chest. By the time the rescue team arrived by helicopter, Ryan's pulse was faint but present. Mark showed no vital signs. Paramedics confirmed heat stroke and severe dehydration. Ryan was treated with intravenous fluids and transported to Flagstaff Medical Center, where he remained in recovery for 3 days. The National Park Service recorded Mark Uri's death as the 6th heat-related fatality in Grand Canyon that year. Ryan Patel later told investigators he hadn't realized how fast the heat locked in on them. Co-workers said he stopped hiking entirely and left the company within months. It was September 7, 2015, in the Grand Canyon National Park, Arizona. The park's entrance signs warned visitors to keep distance from wildlife. For Arav Mehta, 32, that sign was another photo opportunity. Arav had moved to Las Vegas from Mumbai 4 months earlier to start a financial analyst job for a commercial investment firm. He was ambitious, eager to fit in, and obsessed with documenting his American adventure all framed to show him thriving abroad. Though intelligent and disciplined at work, he had a habit of trivializing risk. He'd once joked about how in his home country, India, everything's 1,000 times more risky. He wore trail shoes and gym shorts instead of hiking boots that day, carrying only a small hydration pack and a phone charger, ignoring park advice about gear and distance. The Bright Angel Trail was already known for its unpredictable hazards, extreme heat, loose terrain, and frequent encounters with Grand Canyon rattlesnakes. Rangers recommended early starts and constant awareness near shaded switchbacks where snakes cooled themselves. And when they rounded a rocky curve near the 1.5-mile rest house, they heard the dry buzz of a rattle about 15 feet ahead. The snake was coiled at the trail's edge, partly concealed in shadow. One of his co-workers urged caution, suggesting they step around and keep moving. But Arav, grinning, crouched down and said he wanted a close-up for Instagram. The others laughed nervously, assuming he was joking. He moved closer, holding his phone out, steadying his knee on the gravel. The snake's head lifted slightly, its coils tightening. A friend half-jokingly called him crazy. Another said to stop. Arav, trying to show control, leaned a little closer, less than 3 feet away. The strike happened too fast to register. A blur of motion, a dry snap, and then Arav's sudden flinch as the snake recoiled. The fangs had punctured his right calf through the thin fabric of his shorts. For a few seconds, he laughed nervously, insisting it barely got him. But his co-workers panicked, guiding him toward a shaded rock ledge and calling 911 from a patchy service area. One tied a shirt loosely above the bite, another tried to keep him from standing. Within 20 minutes, his leg began to swell noticeably, the skin around the punctures darkening. He complained of burning pain radiating toward his knee and a metallic taste in his mouth. By the 40-minute mark, his speech slurred and he vomited repeatedly. Around an hour after the bite, his pulse grew erratic and he drifted in and out of consciousness. The dispatch operator instructed them to keep him calm until rangers arrived, but the heat and isolation made it difficult. Roughly 75 minutes after the strike, Arav lost the ability to sit upright. His breathing slowed and he collapsed. When park rangers reached the group by helicopter around 12:30 p.m., they confirmed no pulse and began CPR. But the neurotoxic and hemotoxic effects of the Grand Canyon rattlesnake's venom had already caused cardiovascular collapse. Rangers declared Arav Mehta dead at the scene at 12:48 p.m. His co-workers were questioned by investigators. The official report classified the incident as preventable wildlife provocation. Rangers called it one of the year's most needless deaths. Within a week, the story barely circulated beyond local outlets. His employer released a short condolence note. Co-workers deleted the photos they'd taken that morning. The trail reopened the next day. It was March 18, 2017, when the Canyonair hung at Grandview Point in Grand Canyon National Park. The view stretched endlessly, quiet and unbroken. It was the kind of deceptive calm that made danger feel distant, and that illusion was exactly what drew Elliot Kaufer too far. Elliot, 29, lived in Flagstaff and worked as a delivery driver for a local equipment supplier. He spent weekends hiking and posting photos of himself at obscure overlooks, often tagging brands for gear sponsorships that never came. His friends described him as confident, sometimes overly so, and very impatient. He had been hiking for years, but rarely trained seriously or learned safety protocols. A week earlier, over beers at a co-worker's barbecue, Elliot had talked about his next hike. He said the marked switchbacks of Bright Angel and South Kaibab were for tourists, that real hikers cut their own lines if they knew where to look. Grandview Point, he said, had an old miner's route dropping steeply toward Horseshoe Mesa, a trail once used during the copper mining era, but now only partly maintained. The area was known among rangers for friable shale, loose footing, and deceptive drop-offs masked by desert scrub. But Elliot saw that as part of the appeal. That morning, he parked his silver Subaru Outback in the visitor lot before sunrise and checked a topographic app on his phone. His plan was likely to descend the ridge directly beneath the viewpoint, skipping the established Grandview Trail that wound east toward Horseshoe Mesa. There were clear warning signs advising against unmarked descent, but he probably dismissed them as exaggerated. A ranger later recalled seeing him glance at the signboard briefly before continuing. When Elliot didn't show up for work the next day, A co-worker reported him missing. Rangers found his car still parked at Grandview Point, untouched, which prompted a full search along unofficial paths below the rim. By mid-morning, the sun was higher, and the shale surface had loosened. Helicopter crews spotted fresh slide marks and scattered gear along an unmarked slope south of the viewpoint. From there, investigators began reconstructing what must have happened. Based on those findings, they determined Elliott likely began descending diagonally down the ridge. Around one section, search teams found clear scuff marks and a broken trekking pole. The positioning suggested he tried to steady himself, but lost traction on the shale, which sheared away under his weight. His backpack was discovered wedged in rock about halfway down, a sign he had tumbled, caught briefly, and then continued falling. The slope below was a series of angled ledges, ending in a vertical exposure roughly 180 feet deep. Evidence from impact patterns and debris allowed rescuers to piece together the sequence: a long slide, several impacts, and a final fall into the basin. The autopsy confirmed multiple blunt force injuries to the head, chest, and lower extremities, consistent with repeated impact and rotation during descent. His climbing rope remained coiled and secured to the pack straps, unused. There were no signs of attempted self-arrest, meaning the fall was fast and disorienting. One of his trail shoes had been torn off by the third ledge. Search and rescue teams recovered the body the following day. Loose scree and unstable slopes required a short-haul helicopter extraction rather than a ground recovery. The coroner declared the death accidental, caused by blunt force trauma. Among rescuers, the case was discussed as an example of how quickly simple overconfidence could turn fatal, but the public response was minimal. Afterward, hiking forums briefly debated whether the route he attempted even qualified as a shortcut or just an off-trail scramble. It was June 25th, 2016, a dry, hot afternoon along the Colorado River deep within Grand Canyon National Park, Arizona, where the canyon's limestone walls trapped heat and echo. The water moved deceptively fast, glassy under the sun, its true depth masked by sediment churn. A narrow rock ledge jutted out above a bend in the river, steep, high, and worn smooth by years of flooding. Liam Baloney, 23, was a business student at the University of Arizona. He spent weekends chasing adrenaline and photos. His social media account was filled with cliff dives, rooftop selfies, and hiking shots captioned with slogans about living loud. He wasn't a professional athlete, but he wanted the image of one. He and his friends followed accounts that glorified risk, and each new trip was an unspoken competition for who could post something more extreme. The Grand Canyon was new territory for the group. They'd driven up from Tucson to celebrate finishing summer classes, camping near the South Rim before hiking down along a guided trail used by rafters near a bend of the Colorado River. The ledge they found sat about 30 feet above the water, reachable by a short scramble along a side outcrop. Conditions were far from ideal. Late spring runoff and dam releases from Glen Canyon had raised the Colorado's level, creating stronger currents and obscuring boulders beneath the bend. They started with jokes, daring each other to go first. Liam volunteered immediately. He'd done similar jumps at Lake Powell and wanted the best video for their page. One friend prepared to record from the side while the others stood on the ledge behind him. The plan was simple: sprint, leap, and surface downstream. The problem was that the ledge didn't project far enough to clear the cliff's lower angle, and the landing zone, agitated by the current, was deceptively narrow. From above, the surface appeared still, hiding partially submerged rock shelves common to that stretch of river. Friends later told investigators that Liam paced backward several steps, shook his hands once, and sprinted forward. His shoes scuffed the edge just before takeoff. From their vantage point, it looked like a solid jump, until he twisted slightly midair, likely from uneven footing. His body turned off axis, hitting the water diagonally rather than cleanly. The sound was sharp, a thud masked by the splash. For a moment, the group waited, expecting him to surface with a grin. Then a small patch of red appeared in the downstream current. Two of his friends scrambled down the slope, shouting, scanning the water, but the current was too strong. The others ran to higher ground, trying to spot movement. They never saw him resurface. The group called 911 within minutes. but cell reception was weak, forcing one to climb until the signal returned. Dispatch contacted park rangers stationed at Phantom Ranch, who coordinated a river rescue unit already operating nearby. It took nearly an hour for a National Park Service boat to reach the site. Divers located Liam's body several hours later, wedged among submerged rocks roughly 20 yards downstream. His head and chest bore fractures consistent with striking stone beneath shallow water. The autopsy confirmed massive blunt force trauma as the cause of death. Officials determined he had likely been knocked unconscious instantly upon impact. The Park Service issued a short statement reminding visitors that cliff jumping anywhere within Grand Canyon National Park is prohibited. The body was airlifted out the next morning after recovery documentation was completed. Liam's university arranged quiet counseling sessions for the witnesses. No formal memorial was held. It was May 14th, 2016, a clear and windless morning along the south rim of the Grand Canyon. The air was cool enough to invite risk, and the visibility stretched for miles across the layered cliffs. Few people were on the trail that early. Nothing in the scene suggested danger, until someone decided to reach past the edge. Jason Brownsmith, 27, was an aspiring tech vlogger from Phoenix. He worked part-time at a local electronics retailer, filming reviews of gadgets and drones in his spare hours. Most of his uploads drew a few hundred views, but he treated each one like it might go viral. His online persona leaned on confidence he didn't always have in person. He was careful about his equipment, but reckless about context, often ignoring park rules for the sake of a better shot. The Grand Canyon, with its vast backdrop and vertical drop, offered what he called limitless framing potential. He brought 2 drones that morning, an older mid-range model for practice, and a newer one he'd spent months saving for, hoping to capture smoother aerial footage. The terrain near the south rim is deceptive. Hard-packed dust crusted over brittle sandstone, which can crumble without warning. Drone operators are warned not to fly near cliff edges because the rotor's air pressure can dislodge loose material. Jason knew this, but considered himself skilled enough to handle it. His followers expected smooth tracking shots and bold camera angles, and he wanted to deliver something professional-looking. He began the flight shortly after 8 a.m., guiding the drone over the edge for a sweeping canyon view. The footage showed calm, slow pans, until the drone clipped a rock outcrop on the far wall. One rotor broke, sending it spinning down before catching on a narrow ledge about 6 feet below the rim. His frustration likely turned into determination. The drone had cost nearly $1,000, and he wasn't going to lose it. A smarter choice would have been to notify rangers, but he saw the ledge as reachable. The drone, still recording and transmitting to his controller, continued to capture everything. Jason kneeling at the rim, setting down his gear, and leaning over to plan his retrieval. The sandstone edge sloped slightly downward, dusted with fine grit that made it slippery. Jason tested his footing once, then lowered himself over the rim, gripping a small rock lip with one hand and bracing his left shoe against the wall. From the drone's fixed perspective on the ledge, the camera caught him lowering carefully out of view, a shaky, angled image of his arm stretching toward the frame. The drone's camera, still recording, caught the subtle crumble of sand under his weight. He reached with his free hand, stretching for the drone, but his center of balance shifted back. For an instant, he tried to pull forward again, boots scraping for traction, but the surface gave way entirely. The recording continued without interruption, showing his sudden disappearance from frame, followed by the violent jolt of the camera as his hand struck it mid-fall. The image spun skyward, capturing flashes of sky and cliff, then settled at an odd tilt. His camera bag slid after him, hitting the cliff twice before tumbling out of frame. Hikers about a quarter-mile east reported hearing a short yell followed by 2 impacts. Park rangers responded within the hour after a visitor alerted them to an unattended tripod. They located Jason's body roughly 250 feet down, lodged against a small shelf of rock. Rescuers noted that his harness strap was still clipped to his backpack, suggesting he had been using it to anchor his gear rather than himself. His injuries indicated an immediate fatal fall. The ranger report classified the death as accidental and preventable. Drone operation near cliff edges remained prohibited, and park staff later installed additional warning posts near the overlook area where the incident occurred. Jason's parents later donated his remaining equipment to a Phoenix makerspace. It was November 3rd, 2015, a calm afternoon along the south rim of the Grand Canyon. The clouds were thin and white, the air mild after 2 days of rain. Visitors moved slowly along the overlook, pausing for pictures in the pale sunlight. The ground was slick in places, the earth still damp and soft from runoff. Karen Lee, 25, was visiting from San Diego with a few college friends. She worked in digital marketing for a travel accessories company and was known among her group for planning photogenic trips. She had a streak of impulsiveness, especially when it came to photos. Her friends often joked that she'd do anything for the shot. That morning, she had chosen a bright yellow windbreaker for contrast against the red canyon backdrop. The group carried small tripods, phones, and a compact camera. They walked beyond the main paved lookout toward a narrow dirt path where a few scattered rocks formed a natural platform. The soil there was deceptive, hard on top but unstable underneath, weakened by the rain. Rangers often warned about it, but the signs were posted farther back near the main railings, not at the informal photo spots. It was an area where tourists took unnecessary risks, stepping too close for pictures that blurred the line between bravery and carelessness. The idea was simple: take synchronized jump shots with the canyon behind them. Karen insisted on timing the countdown, wanting the perfect frame midair. The first few attempts were safe, each person jumping back from the edge, laughing when the camera missed. Then Karen wanted one of herself alone, framed with the canyon below. Her friends hesitated, warning that the ground still looked damp, but she waved them off. She adjusted her stance closer to the rim, set the self-timer, and stepped back to jump again. A bystander filming the landscape caught the sequence in the corner of his video. Karen bent her knees and jumped, but her landing was a fraction too far forward. Her boots struck a thin, overhanging ledge that immediately fractured. The rock crumbled in chunks, and her weight shifted with it. For a second, she tried to steady herself, arms flailing, but the ground disappeared beneath her. She dropped straight down, hitting the side once before sliding into a brush-filled chute roughly 50 feet below. The sound of her friends screaming carried through the canyon air. One scrambled toward the edge but stopped when the remaining soil started to break under his shoes. Another ran back toward the trail for help. A nearby visitor used his cell phone to call 911, and park dispatch alerted the closest ranger patrol. Rangers arrived within minutes, guided by the witnesses shouting. Rescuers rappelled down the chute to reach her. The terrain was steep and unstable, forcing them to dig footholds into wet sandstone. Karen was found lodged against a patch of low brush. She had sustained multiple fractures and severe blunt trauma consistent with the 50-foot fall. Medics attempted resuscitation briefly, but confirmed she had died at the scene from internal injuries before extraction. Footage from the bystander's camera later surfaced for a short period online. Within hours, comment sections filled with strangers calling her the influencer who fell for a picture. Some fabricated details, claiming she'd been live streaming, though she hadn't been. The video was quietly removed after park investigators requested its deletion to protect the family's privacy. It lasted 2 days before her family requested it to be taken down. The friends who had been with her deleted their accounts and avoided interviews. Thanks for watching. If you liked these stories, click here